Good afternoon, everybody. It's time for another Bull Shark session, and hey, we might be getting a little bit better at this. This is, I think, number 4 or 5, and we are joined by Kelly Davey. Kelly, wave really quick, just a little wave. Kelly is the Director of Travel and Retail at Aquatic Adventures Ohio, and she's actually checking in on the fish behind her there, making sure that they're fed today. So we appreciate you taking some time to jump on. And with us, all the way from Utah, what's the name of that town again, Mike?
I'm in Layton, near Hill Air Force Base.
All right, Layton, Utah is Mike Ange. And many of you might not know Mike, but we are excited to introduce him to you. He's done a lot of things that you probably don't know, but that have affected a lot of divers, especially ones that have come through the shop, as it relates to dive instruction, dry suits potentially. So, Mike, welcome to the session. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And we hope things are going well for you out there. You know, obviously, it's a lot of crazy times for everybody right now, and sounds like you guys and your family is doing just fine.
We are. We're doing well. We're doing like everybody else and staying home and being safe and following the instructions we've been given. So,
great. I think I'll let everybody know just really quick how we met. And we met at DEMA this year, or I guess it's last year, right? Now it's November of 19, when Ryan Parkovich, and Ryan Parkovich is leads our service department and has for many, many years and does great work, because we were interested in looking at some dry suits. And we went over to the OThree booth, and I met with you. And long story short is Aquatic Adventures became a dealer for OThree before all of this happened. In fact, some of you may remember we had an event scheduled that got postponed due to all of this. And that was going to include Mike. And we were going to let people try our dry suits out, talk to Mike in person, ask as many questions as they could. And that got postponed. So we're happy to have you here. We're happy to have the dry suits. I think they're a fantastic product, and we look forward to getting more people in them as this dive season hopefully can get underway. But you've done a lot of things in your career outside of dry suits and working with OThree specifically. You've been a manufacturer's consultant. I think you continue to do that. You've been in law enforcement. You've been in diving, it sounds like, for most of your career. And most recently, a writer and an author of a book, and you're working on a new book. And you've done work in authorship for SDI and TDI. So I don't know where to get started, to be honest, but I'll let you introduce yourself, maybe what you're currently working on, and we can go from there.
So I've been in the industry about, 30 years now. Gosh, time flies. My story is I started in retail. I was a law enforcement officer, a narcotics agent actually, and got called back to active military service for Gulf War I, and some injuries from the Gulf precluded me going back to law enforcement. So I found myself with a new career in diving as a result, and a friend of mine from the Army and I opened a shop in North Carolina, actually, where I'm from, and we were in the retail business for a little better than a decade, and we wound up having shops in North Carolina and a shop down in Key West for a bit. And along the way, I went to work for some of the training agencies. I was very early into the adoption of technical diving. I started doing mixed gas dives back in the 1980s. Dick Rakowski, the father of nitrox diving, was my first nitrox instructor, actually. And as a result of kind of being early to the game, I guess I was invited by TDI, and in those days there was no SDI, it was just TDI, to write some books on a number of different topics, but advanced recs are my passion. And so I've written about 10 I guess, 10 diving textbooks now for the SDI family and for SSI as well. And I am currently under contract to update the Advanced and Technical Wreck Diving Manual for TDI currently. So that's kind of my story a little bit, I guess. Done some fun dives over the years on the Monitor and on the Vandenberg, the first dive. So,
so I think that's for those of you that have been into the shop or taking diving lessons with us, we are an SDI shop, Scuba Diving International, and it's neat to know that put a face with some of the stuff that we've all read and learned from over the course of the years, and that you're continuing to write for them. How did you get into that exactly? How did you make the transition from retail to writer? So that's probably not an easy answer.
No, it's not an easy answer. I'll try to keep it short though. So my retail business really worked in a completely different method of operation, I guess, than most of the stores that are out there. We our specialty, our claim to fame back in the day was that we ran dive training programs in collegiate environments. We ran college courses from the College of William and Mary up in Virginia all the way down to the South Carolina border. And we also did a number of wellness programs for companies like IBM and Northern Telecom and Glaxo, and then Glaxo Wellcome back in the day. So kind of being on the cutting edge of the technical world and also in the university world, people began to ask us to do things like develop training standards and that kind of stuff. So when TDI kind of split off from one of the other tech agencies, I was one of the first instructors to come over. I'm proud of my 2-digit TDI number 94, so which happens to be the same year that that the agency started. So I was asked to write some of the early books, and was there on their advisory board when we launched SDI. And I actually was doing public safety instruction at the time. And so ERDI actually was a spinoff from my local business in North Carolina, and also wrote some of the early books for that training segment as well.
And I think if I remember right, you've also done a lot of writing for Scuba Diving Magazine.
For magazines around the world, but I was a regular columnist for scuba diving from 2001 through part of 2009. The years run together at this point, but I wrote their Lessons for Life column, which was I'm proud to say the #1 column for a number of years, and depended on the year, but there were years that I wrote as many as 3 columns every month for the magazine, and there were other years when I just did Lessons for Life.
Yeah. So. And go ahead, Kelly.
And Mike, I want to say thank you for your service, first of all. I did not know that about you, so appreciate that. I started diving in 2012, which seems like yesterday, and I was literally in my class, not even a certified diver yet, when I heard about the book Diver Down. And I went to my bookstore and I got it, and that's the very first book I had ever read about diving. And I just was, really enjoyed it. And then I found out that you were the author of that book. I think that's something that really has helped a lot of divers along the way. So thank you.
I appreciate that very much. So I enjoyed writing the book. It was kind of a spin-off from the Scuba Diving Magazine Lessons for Life column. McGraw-Hill was doing a series of books in multiple sports and areas, and they found my columns in Diver Down and actually contacted me and asked me to write it. So it's the most fun book I've written. So had a good time with that one.
Is there any chapter, and don't give it away, is there any chapter that you like better than others?
So there are 2 chapters in the book that actually involve me personally.
Okay.
I won't say which ones they are, but there's one chapter in there where a guy did a bunch of really stupid stuff and lived to tell about it. I'm that guy, although I don't say it in the book.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go out and buy it. I'm gonna go out and get it and read it. Well, hey, at some point diving led you to the Vandenberg, and I think that a lot of people that are probably watching this know what that is. But you had some parts in that. I'd love for you to share that story. I think it's really interesting.
So back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I ran the North and South American division of Draeger Dive. Draeger was the first commercially viable rebreather in the marketplace. And so a group of guys down in Key West were trying to sink a wreck, and they needed a sponsor. And the way I initially got involved was Draeger became the first commercial sponsor for the wreck of the Vandenberg. And so I was involved with fundraising for a decade, helping those guys out. And then when we got close to the sink date, they asked me if I would head up the technical clearance and the explosive ordnance recovery teams for the sinking of the wreck. We had to be sure that the wreck was stable once it got to the bottom, so that things weren't going to collapse on top of people. And we also had to be sure that all of the explosives, we had 42 high explosive charges that we used on the wreck to sink it. And we had to be sure that all of those charges had actually exploded, so they weren't a hazard to divers. And at the time, we were still a little closer to 9/11. So the authorities were also concerned that none of those explosives got off the ship and wound up in somebody else's hands. So as a result of that, I wound up doing the first clearance dives on the wreck. I was on the wreck with Joe Weatherby and Bob Smith from the Sheriff's Department in Monroe County. And we did the very first dive about 15 minutes after it sank, after it hit bottom. So
my next question is going to be a layup, so how did you determine if there were still explosives that had not been charged?
We had to physically go down and check every explosive charge. So I put together a team of 12 divers, and we determined very quickly that it was going to be easier to take technical divers that were already trained for very low visibility because the ship just sank, and for unstable environments, again, the ship just sank. We decided it would be easier to take very experienced, advanced and technical wreck divers and train them how to look at and deal with explosives, as opposed to trying to take explosive guys and teach them how to deal with a wreck.
Oh.
So we brought the team together in Key West when the ship was at dock while we were prepping it for sinking, and the tech divers went in and laid guidelines and things in advance. And we were also afraid of people going in the wreck, so when we did the dives, all those guidelines had to come back out. And but we ran from entry points, at least 2 different entry points to every single explosive charge, and we put physical eyes on every window pane that we had down there to be sure that they all exploded.
Do you remember from the time that you guys did your check to when it was open to the public to dive?
So we had planned to open the ship the very next day. However, there were, as you probably know, what makes the ship famous is the 3 satellite dishes on top.
Yep.
And 2 of those satellite dishes, weighing in at 15 tons and 13 tons, floated off the wreck when it sank. And they sat down on the wreck, one of them dangling off the side, literally hanging on a single piece of metal. So we had to actually keep the wreck closed for 3 days, which was a very bad situation for the local dive community, because they had all these people down there wanting to dive, but we were just afraid that the current would hit one of those satellite dishes and it would fall off on somebody and they'd have a very bad day. So we spent a couple of days chaining them back to the wreck, and that's when we were able to open it. So 2 days later.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you've obviously done a lot, and I know from just talking to you that you teach cave diving. I think your passion is still with wrecks, it sounds like, but your experiences in diving run the gamut. And right now you're doing work with OThree, which is the dry suit line that we do carry. How did you and why did you choose them to partner with? And for those of you that are watching that may not know, they're a company out of the UK. They specialize in dry suits and exposure protection. And maybe just give the viewers just a brief hey, I chose to work with them because?
So I guess initially I'd say that, you know, exposure protection is one of my passions. Other than a dive mask, there's nothing more important in your kit bag than exposure protection. Because if you're cold and miserable, you're not having fun. If you're not having fun, you're not going to keep diving.